And I'm going to share my screen. Let me go back. Oh, yes, here we are. Let me make this smaller. Okay, so Deuteronomy 34. Here we're at the end of the story of Moses, and we've seen him as an extraordinary leader. Of course, he is the great Moses. We call the Torah the five books of Moses, and in fact, he is there through four of them. Uh, Moses is the classic prophet who stood between God and the people of Israel, both conveying God's instructions to Israel and repeatedly defending the people of Israel against God as God seeks to punish them again and again for their disobedience. Moses is not interested in glory for himself. As we saw a couple of times, God offers to wipe out the people and start again. Moses could be the next Abraham. He wants nothing of it. He wants God to be the leader. And if not, he says, wipe me out of your book. Not worth it. He is concerned not only with leading the people, but with securing future leadership. And it is at his request, as we saw last time, that the people not be as sheep without a shepherd, that God tells him that he should appoint his servant, Joshua, who will become the next leader. And Moses does that, does it very publicly. Uh, Moses, as we saw last time, also strikes the rock rather than talking to it. And we explored that at length. And now we've come to the end, the last chapter of the book of Deuteronomy and the last chapter of the Torah itself. So Moses goes up from the steppes of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the summit of Pisgah, opposite Jericho. So he is on the other side of the Jordan from the land of Israel. He's at a high point, and God shows him the entire land, Gilad as far as Dan. Now, it's of course not possible. I mean, I suppose you could see the whole land in an airplane, but it is not possible to see the whole land of Israel, even from a high point. Uh, and so the rabbis looking at this say that Moses must have been given some supernatural ability. And there's a lovely midrash uh, based on a psalm which you may know because it's part of the Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat service. There, the psalm says, Or Zarua la Tzadik, the light is planted or spread for the righteous. In other words, it is placed into the ground, as it were, hidden away for the righteous. And so we have this midrash, which really goes back to the days of creation. And as you may know or remember from when we studied it, the progress of creation is that light is created on the first day, and then the sun, the moon, and the stars are created on the fourth day. And so the rabbis ask, what happened to the light on the first day, the light of creation? Because the only light we know of on earth is the light of the sun, the moon, and the stars. And so their answer is, or Zarua la Tzadik, that the night light was stored away for the righteous. And it was that light which gave Moses this extraordinary ability to see the entire land. Gilad, as far as Dan, all of Naphtali, the land of Ephraim, Manasseh, the land of Judah, as far as the Western Sea. towards the Negev, in other words, and then towards the Mediterranean, and then the Negev and the plain and the valley of Jericho, the city of palm trees, as far as Zoar. So, and God said to him, "This is the land that I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will assign it to your offspring. I have let you see it with your own eyes, but you shall not cross there." So here Moses does get the opportunity to see the culmination of his life's worth. He sees it, he knows it's there, he knows the people will go into the land, but he knows that he will not. And then we get this statement. So Moses, the servant of Adonai, died there in the land of Moab at the command of Adonai. So mipi, in Hebrew, the command of Adonai, mipi Adonai, literally from the mouth of God. And so the rabbis understand this to mean that Moses died with a kiss, that God kissed Moses, as it were, very anthropomorphic language, of course, that God kissed Moses and Moses died. And then it goes on, he was buried in the valley in the land of Moab near Bet Peor. So it said he was buried. You'll see that this translation says God buried him. And indeed, there was no one else to do it. And so this is, and as you know, and I mentioned this before, this is one of the classic acts that a person can do of chesed, right? Of kindness. In fact, to bury the dead is said to be the highest kind of chesed, chesed shelamet, true chesed, because there can, when you bury the dead, there is no way that you can be paid back. It's a pure act. The idea that God here buries him, sees to his dignity, is an ultimate tribute to this person who was God's servant. And no one knows his burial place to this day. And I think that that's important, in that if it were known, it would undoubtedly become a place of pilgrimage. Like people would come, and this, of course, happens and happened in ancient Israel. We have, for example, Rachel's tomb, which became a site of veneration. But if it was Moses, how much more so? And so Moses, we have no remnant of the physical Moses, but Moses's influence is all over the Torah. If you want to take a journey to Moses, you go to the Torah. He was 120 years old, which is classically the longest life that a person can achieve, setting aside all those early accounts of people who lived hundreds of years. His eyes were undimmed, his vigor unabated. We see something similar to Abraham here. The idea was he didn't die of natural causes. He was still strong. He had all of his faculties. And he died that way because he died at the command of God. The Israelites bewail him in the steppes of Moab for 30 days. And so we see this as an act of tribute. And when the days of mourning for Moses came to an end, Joshua was filled with the Spirit. And so there's this period in which Joshua is not yet leading, but Moses is being mourned. It's a kind of transitional period. And the people, in some ways, need time to prepare themselves for a new leader. And then he is filled with the spirit of wisdom. The Hebrew makes it clear this is God's spirit. This is the spirit that God had placed in Moses, a certain kind of charisma, but much more than that. And why? Because Moses had laid his hands on him. That very public scene where Moses transferred authority, uh, and the Israelites heeded him, doing as God had commanded Moses. And more or less, they heed him. They don't challenge him the way they challenged Moses. And finally, we get this reflection at the end. Never again did there arise in Israel a prophet like Moses, who Adonai singled out face to face. Never would there be a prophet who would have such direct, uh, unmediated access to the divine, not literally seeing God's face, of course, because as we read, God said a person cannot see his face and live. But here we're talking about a very intimate relationship. One of the rabbinic comments on this is, well, Moses saw God as if through a clear glass, and all the others saw God through a glass that was unclear, more a reflection back to them than a reflection of God. And what about Moses? The various signs and portents that God sent him to display in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and his courtiers, his whole country, for all the great might and awesome power that Moses, not God exactly, because Moses is the one who does it, displayed before all of Israel. And so we get here a kind of eulogy for Moses as a leader who will never be surpassed. I think it's quite a beautiful picture, actually, and really brings to a conclusion this whole period as Joshua will now lead them into the land of Israel, performing on a small scale some of the miracles that Moses did, most notably splitting the Jordan so the people can go through, just as Moses had split the Sea of Reeds. Okay, let me stop sharing. Any comments about this, about the death of Moses or Moses's legacy? Go ahead, Sandy.
Um, did you say, I don't know if you said it or not, if it's in the Safari edition that you were using, that Moses was gathered to his kin? Did it say that?
Um, I I can go back
I,
and
I don't remember you saying that, but I may have been thinking about what other thing you were saying.
yeah, no, I was talking about how his eyes were
Right.
undim and his vigor was strong. I don't think it says that actually, but
Because
but let's look. I could be wrong. Let's go
I
back.
don't remember you saying that, but I,
Yeah. Yeah, it does not say that he was the language which is used with the other figures in Torah is not used with
but
him. And I'm glad
it,
you pointed it out because it's interesting. Go
it,
ahead.
no, it is in the edition that maybe it's in Hertz, wherever I read it. Because I was having a big discussion with Joe about this because uh, initially, the ossuary, how do you pronounce it?
Yeah, ossuary.
And that's when originally it meant that, but then later on, it sounds like it changed because nobody knows where his grave is. And
Yeah.
so I remember distinctly reading that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really it's interesting also because Moses was in some ways estranged from his family. We don't see a close relationship with his wife, and his children are barely mentioned. But the it's really and perhaps it also points to what is an unnatural death. Um, but it's an interesting fact. Now, the idea of ossuaries, you know, certainly was true in the rabbinic period. I wonder if, is there anybody who has some sort of sound behind them? I keep hearing, yeah. If is everybody muted? Let me. Okay, well, so now everybody is muted, and if need be, if you have a question or a comment, we'll just ask you to unmute. So it's a great observation. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, and I'm going to think about it. So thank you for that. Go ahead.
Because is that where the rabbis get the concept when it says gathered to his kin, that when we die, we're reunited with our families? Is that where that comes from?
I don't know that, I'm not sure that's a rabbinic idea. It's certainly a popular idea. It's a cultural idea. We do have that sense, and people who've had these so-called near-death experiences often see their family. So it seems to be maybe more than a metaphor. I don't know. So much about death is just mysterious, really. But this, I think, even more so because it's such an unnatural death. Any other? Yeah, Barry, can you adjust your? Yeah, I could sort of see. That's better. Now I can see more of your.
Uh, so just a related question: is there any concept of Moses's offspring, perhaps perhaps in Midrash?
There may be. I don't know of any. Which is striking. I mean, what doesn't happen is that they don't seem to inherit any kind of leadership role. They're mentioned briefly. The last time is when when Moses' father-in-law, Yitro, comes to him after they've come out through the sea, and Yitro comes and he says, "I've come with your children, your wife and your children." But there is also, at least according to the Midrash, he's estranged from his wife. And in fact, you get that in that story, your wife who you had sent away. When Moses marries another woman, this Cushite woman, some of the Midrash wants to say, well, he remarried his wife who he had sent away. That was kind of a divorce and remarriage. I think probably the meaning of sent away was to protect her from this battle which was going to take place. But it's really hard to know. She was with his father-in-law at the time of the Exodus. Okay, any other comments about Moses? All right, we're going to jump in then as we're moving on to our next leader. Okay, so moving to Deborah, a couple of words about judges in general. We've moved beyond Moses, and actually we're skipping over Joshua to a period which is known as the period of the Shoftim. A Shofet is a judge, but we don't see them very much in a judicial role. In fact, the judges seem to have much more to do with military leadership than we see any kind of judging. But as chieftains or leaders, and they don't lead the entire people. What they tend to do when there are challenges, enemies, as we'll see in this case also, then some of the tribes will gather together. They will appoint a leader who will lead them in battle. And that's the sense of judge. Now, if you're the leader, presumably people will come to you and you will adjudicate cases. Just as Moses, you recall, after he comes through the sea and he's there, and then when Jethro comes to him, one of the things he said is, "You're wearing out the people. They come before you. They're getting exhausted. You're getting exhausted. It's not good." And he tells him to appoint a series of, as it were, lower court judges, individuals And then ultimately, very little would come to Moses. And so there you get a sense also of the leader being a judge. We don't see, with the exception of a little comment here, we don't really see any of these figures doing anything judicial. Now, one of the themes of the book of Judges, it's a kind of recurring theme. The people did what was offensive to God. Ehud was the previous judge, actually the first one, and he was gone. And what happens time and again is they do something that's offensive, and then God summons one of the other people nearby to go against the people of Israel as a kind of punishment. That's at least how it's read. It's a theme which will recur again and again before each of the judges, and that's how they come into play. They don't have a king and will not have a king until after this period when we'll get into the book of Samuel, and ultimately a king is appointed. But that will not take place for a long time. So what happens? God surrenders them or allows them to be conquered by King Yavin of Canaan, who reigned at Hatzor. So it's a little odd to say that he was king of Canaan, because Canaan did not have a king. There were a variety of tribal leaders. Various parts of the area were led by various kings. He was perhaps the preeminent king there in Canaan, and he had a commander of his army who was Sisera, and Sisera had a base, of operations at Orsat Goyim. And the Israelites cried out to God because he had 900 iron chariots, and he oppressed Israel ruthlessly for 20 years. So the Israelites are under the thumb of Canaan, and particularly under the thumb of the military commander, who is Sisera. Iron is, of course, high tech for that period of time. And so this means that they had the best weapons around. You couldn't really go against them. And now we get a figure. She is Deborah, who is the wife of Lapidot, and she was a prophet, and she led Israel. It's striking in the Hebrew that she's called Isha Nevi'ah, a woman prophet. It's that her femininity, you could simply say she was a prophet, but being a woman prophet, saying that she was a woman prophet, it in some ways, obviously, her name is Deborah. She's a wife, and therefore she's a prophet, and therefore she's a woman. It's obvious. Yet the text wants to emphasize that she is a woman, which is quite striking. She is the only leader of the people who is female. And the word led, she was sort of acknowledged as a leader, perhaps because of her ability to convey what God wants. And she was, just as we saw that Sisera had a base, well, Deborah had a base also. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Beit El in the hill country of Ephraim, and Israelites would come to her for decisions. So presumably the palm gets its name because that's where she was. One assumes that it's a very specific image, right? She's in the shade of the palm tree, but one assumes it's a little bit more elaborate than that. Um, Now, it's not clear what decisions mean. Um, and perhaps they come to her as a prophet to inquire from God what should be done in a specific situation. Or maybe she's there and adjudicating disputes. There's very little information here, so we really don't know a great deal about it. Okay, she summons Barak, the son of Avinoam of Kadesh in Naphtali, and says to him, so she has this ability to call people, to summon them. And now she says to him, the eternal God of Israel has commanded, go march up to Mount Tabor, take 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zvulun. I will draw Sisera, Yavin's army commander, with his chariots and his troops toward you up the Wadi Kishon, and I will deliver him into your hands. Right? So this is an order. It's an order from God that is being conveyed through the mouth of this prophet. Mount Tabor, if you know the topology, the landscape of Israel, Mount Tabor is a really interesting place because it's a single. It's not part of a mountain range. It's a single mountain. It goes up very high, and from the top of it, you get a clear view out around to the land, which is largely flat. So God is saying, go up there and with your 10,000 men from these two tribes, and I will trap Sisera with his chariots and his troops up in Wadi Kishon. So Wadi Kishon, a wadi is a river that is mostly dry through the year, but can flood very easily. In fact, if you go hiking in the land of Israel, you have to be careful if you hike in a wadi. They're beautiful places to hike, and sometimes there's a little stream that runs through them. It's lovely, but you have to be careful because they can flood and flood dramatically. At any rate, I'll draw him there and I will deliver him into your hands. So it's clear, whereas he is to muster troops, Barak, it is God who will be responsible for this victory. We see here God as a military figure. You might remember from the song At the Sea, Adonai ish milchama, Adonai shemo. God is a man, literally, a man of war, right? Adonai is God's name. So what does Barak say? If you will go with me, I will go, and if not, I won't go. Which really, so for there's a sense here. You can't help but think of Joan of Arc in some ways, but I don't think this means that she is going to have a military role, and perhaps it's simply because she is a woman of God, a prophet. And maybe it even means that I need to be able to consult you to tell me what to do as I go into this battle. Let me know what day is the right day, whatever it is. It's very unclear. She says to him, okay, I'll go with you. And then she says this, however, there will be no glory for you in the course that you are taking, for God will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. So notice again that we're talking about women here. She is a woman prophetess, and it's really unclear who this woman will be. Is it Deborah herself? Is it someone else? And we'll see, of course, that this ambiguity will be resolved and it will indeed be someone else. So she goes with Barak to Kadesh. He musters these tribes, 10,000 men, and they march after him, and she went with him. Now we get a little aside here. Heber the Kenite was separated. He wasn't encamped with the other Kenites who were descendants of Hovav, the father-in-law of Moses. Moses' father-in-law Yitro he's also called Yeter. He's also called Hovav. Had pitched his tent in Elon Bitzanaim, which is near Kadesh. So that's all we know. It's information that we're being provided with here because we will need it a little later. Sifra, now the general, the Canaanite general, hears that Barak has gone up to Mount Tabor. And he immediately orders his chariots, 900 iron chariots, all the troops he had to move from Chorshat Goyim to Vadi Kisho. And Deborah says to Barak, up, this is the day. So she is saying, now is the time. God will deliver Sisera into your hands. God is marching before you. This idea of God marching at the head of an army is something that we also see in the Torah. Very fit, there's a passage which we actually use in synagogue, right? When we take the Torah out of the ark, Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu evecha milfanecha, right? Arise, God, and scatter your enemies before you. In the context of the synagogue, we are saying that it is God's Torah that will do that. But here the idea is God is leading the army. So he charges down Mount Tabor, followed by the 10,000 men. He goes first, which is, not the commander at the rear, but the commander in the front. He goes first, and in the Israeli army, it was a classic statement about military leadership. Acharai, after me. God throws Sisera and all his chariots into a panic before the onslaught. Sisera leaps from his panic and flees on foot. He leaps from his chariot, flees on foot. As Barak pursues the chariots and soldiers as far as Horshat Goyim, all of Sisera's soldiers fall by the sword, not one was left. Sisera, meanwhile, had fled to the tent of Yael, wife of Heber Hakini, Heber the Canaanite, because there was friendship between Yavin of Chatzur and the family of Heber the Kenite. So Yavin, at least one suggestion is that he also thought that this is not a direction that he would go, that the Israelites also had a good relationship with Yavin, and so they would assume that he went in another direction. Unclear to me, but it's something that Robert Alter says in his commentary. So Yael, the wife of Heber, comes out to greet Sisera and says to him, come in, my lord, come in here, come, do not be afraid. And he enters her tent. She covers him with a blanket. He said to her, let me have some water. I'm thirsty. She opens a skin of milk and gives him some to drink and covers him again. This is an extraordinarily maternal image. Feeding milk, covering with a blanket, reassuring, as it were, the child that there's nothing to be worried about. This is a mother who is, as it were, symbolically, who is going to defeat him. He says to her, stand at the entrance of the tent. If anyone comes and asks you if there's anyone here, say no. And then we get this remarkable scene as Yael, the wife of Heber, takes a tent pin, grasps a mallet, right? She's in a tent. She's taking a, and when when Sisera was fast asleep, she comes up to him stealthily and drives the pin through his temple until it went down into the ground, which is, by the way, an extraordinary showing of strength, right? I mean, she has to go through his skull twice to go all the way into the ground. Thus he died. Now Barak appeared in pursuit of Sisera. Yael goes out to greet him, and she says, come, I will show you the man you are looking for. Instead of sending him away, saying there's no one, she actually runs out to get him. She doesn't tell him that he's dead. She just says, I'll show it to you. He went inside with her. Sisera was lying dead with a pin in his temple. On that day, God subdued King Yavin of Canaan before all the Israelites. The hand of the Israelites bore harder on him until they destroyed him. Okay, and I'll stop there because the next chapter is going to be a poem reflecting with some variations what happened to Sisera. Okay, so let me stop. And I welcome your comments about Deborah, her role, Barak, Sisera, and finally this woman, Yael. Like that name, it's my daughter-in-law's name, Yael, who is the one who does the deed, as indeed God will, as Deborah had said, no glory there for Barak. It is a woman who will ultimately put an end to this fierce enemy. Any questions or comments? Yeah, Saul.
Yeah, I don't know if you said this before. I got on a little late. This is the Haftarah of Bashalach.
Yes.
So if anybody wants to look at the Hebrew, this is the Haftarah. Um, I was also in another Zoom class with a different rabbi, and he was talking about Nevi'im, and he mentioned two types of prophets. I'm not sure if I understand this. One is appointed actually by God, and the other is appointed by the king.
Yes.
So maybe you can differentiate that for us.
Yeah. So you see this classically later on. First of all, we're talking about prophets in a kind of different role. In this part of the book, the section of the Bible, which is called, the middle section is called Nevi'im, right? Prophets. But it really consists of two parts. The first part are these historical books, and then the second part are really the classic literary prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and so on. So we're talking about this period. Now, within this period, there are also two kinds of prophets. One kind of prophet are people who simply they speak it, they go into ecstasy, right? They're not really delivering messages, but then there's the kind of prophet who does deliver a message. Now, prophets who are sent by God are delivering God's message. But there are other prophets who are essentially false prophets. They're advisors to kings who claim to be able to let the king know what God wants them to do. They're false prophets. They're not appointed by God. It becomes a kind of as almost a role. If you have a court, in addition to various officers, you also have your court prophet. And maybe you have a lot of court prophets. They may indeed be prophets of another God entirely. There have been kings who who had prophets of Baal working for them. Right? They're just trying to get information from wherever they can get it. So it's very different. They're not really prophets in the classic Jewish sense at all. I hope that's helpful. Any other comments about Deborah or any of this? All right, we're going to move now to the poetry. So let me share again. We'll see how far we can get with this. Okay, so here we go. On that day, Deborah and Barak of Avinoam sang. And of course, this is why this song, this poem of victory, is chosen as the Haftorah for Bishalach, because there too we have a victory. And there too we have a song, the Song at the Sea. When locks go untrimmed in Israel, this seems to be a metaphor for lawlessness. When people dedicate themselves, that is, people joining together because they're in this chaotic environment, they join together to do something in the midst of this. Bless God. Hear, O kings, give ear, O potentates, I will sing. Notice the singular. It's really Deborah who is the focus here. This is her song. I will sing to God, will him, the eternal God of Israel. O God, when you came forth from Seir, advanced from the country of Edom, the earth trembled, the mountains dripped, clouds dripped water, the mountains quaked. You, Sinai, because of God, the God of Israel, in the days of, Jan Sinai. So the idea here is God is a warrior God. The imagery coming out of the country of Edom is really very dramatic, as God is envisioned, the prophets envisioned God, covered in the blood of the enemy. And you see God's power, the mountains quake, and so on. It was the days of Shamgar, that judge, in the days of Yael, right? We'll see how important Yael is. Caravans ceased, and wayfarers went by roundabout paths. Unfortunately, a lot of this is poetry, and it should be presented in poetic form, but Safaria doesn't do that, and that's why you get these odd things like by being capitalized here because it was the beginning of another line, went by roundabout paths. Deliverance ceased in Israel, right? So there are abandons. People have to stay off the roads. Caravans have to stay off the roads. There is no leadership till you arose, Deborah. The Hebrew actually says till I arose, but it's probably an archaic Hebrew form for the second person. Till you arose, O Deborah, a mother in Israel. And again, here now in poetic form, we get this. We don't know of Deborah actually having any children, but her femininity is being emphasized in this poem. When they chose new God, was there a fighter in the gates? No shield or spear was seen among 40,000 Israel. My heart was with Israel's leaders, with the dedicated of your people. Bless, O God, your riders on tawdry jennies, you who sit on saddle rugs, and you wayfarers declare it louder than the sound of archers. There among the watering places, let them chant God's glorious acts. The glorious deliverance of Israel. Then did God's people march down to the gates. Awake, awake, O Devorah, awake, awake, strike up the chant. Arise, O Barak, take your captives of son of Avinoam. Then was the remnant made victor over the mighty. God's people won my victory over the warriors. All right, and then we get a little bit different because we do have a number of other tribes here. From Ephraim came those whose roots were in Amalek, that is where the people of Amalek were. After you, Benjamin, from Machir came Zvulun, and Issachar's chiefs came with Deborah. As Barak, so was Issachar, rushing after him in the valley. Among the clans of Reuven were great decisions of heart. They seemed to not join this alliance of tribes. They were trying to figure it out. Should we go? Should we not go? Why then did you stay among the sheepfolds and listen as they piped for the flocks? Right, these tribes did not do it. Among the clans of Reuven were great searchings of the heart. Gilad tarried beyond the Jordan. Dan, why did he linger by the ships? And Asher remained on the seacoast and tarried at his landings. Zvulun is as a people that mocked at death. Naphtali on the open heights. So they were the warriors, and we get a sense, sorry, that the others do not. Then the kings came, they fought. The kings of Canaan thought, notice it's in the plural here, at Tanakh by Megiddo's waters. They got no spoil of silver. The stars fought from heaven. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. The idea of the stars fighting, I don't think this is astrological. I think that the stars are part of the heavenly hosts. They're, as it were, part of God's army. And then the torrent Kishon swept them away. So here, rather than the swords, we get a sense that in this wadi, there is a huge flood, a raging torrent, the torrent of Kishon. March on, my soul, with courage. Then the horses' hooves pounded as headlong galloped the steeds. Curse Meroz, said the angel of God. Bitterly curse its inhabitants because they came not to God's aid among the warriors. And now we get a retelling of what we saw before. Blessed of women be Yael, the wife of Hever the Kenite, most blessed of women in tents. He asked for water, she offered milk. In a princely bowl, she brought him curds. So here, it's not the skin, like a wineskin, but for milk, it's in a bowl that he's being, and you're, in some sense, you now have a vision, you have this image of her hands that are holding out the bowl. And then her left hand reached for the tent peg, her right for the workman's hammer, very specific, very graphic. And then she struck Sisera, crushed his head, smashed and pierced his temple. At her feet he sank, lay outstretched. Now the Hebrew is between her legs, he sank. I'll come back to that in a minute. At her feet he sank, where he sank, he lay destroyed. And then we get this scene through the window. We're now shifting locale completely back to the camp where Sisera's mother is waiting for him with the women of their household. So, and it's not a tent, right? Because it's behind the lattice. So we have here a structure of some dignity, and she is, the word is hard to translate. Here it's translated as wind. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why so late the clatter of his wheels? The wisest of her ladies gave answer. She said to herself, they must be dividing the spoil they have found, a woman or two for each man. Spoils of dyed cloths for Sisera, spoil of embroidered cloths, a couple of embroidered cloths round each neck as spoil. So may your enemies perish, O God, but may your friends be as the sun rising. So the imagery here, I think, is really quite striking, because she impales him between her legs, And what do Sisera's mother and the other women comfort themselves with? The idea that they're late because they're raping. They have women between their legs, and those women are being penetrated not by a tent peg, but in another way. And then they'll be, of course, be taken captive, and their clothing, the clothing of these women who have been raped, taken captive, those embroidered cloths will now come to Sisera's mother and the women around them. So they comfort themselves with this image, the positive image in their eyes of women being raped, while symbolically her son has been raped. It's a remarkable piece of poetry. The most scholars think it's one of the earliest pieces in the Bible, and may well date back to the period of Judges itself. So, just have a few minutes left, but any comments on the poem, which I think is just remarkable? Anybody at all before you're stunned silent? Yes. I'm not sure who that iPhone is, but if you do have a comment, I saw it light up for a minute. Okay, anybody else? Anything else? Okay. So, yeah, go ahead, Saul.
Yeah, one thing, not about the poem, but Reuven once again doesn't want to participate, just like he didn't want to participate in the conquering of he wanted to go to the east of the Jordan.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Uh, they don't have a sense that they are part of the people there. And it's interesting because he's then coming from a different place also. But there it is, wanting the conquered land. Here it is just not feeling a kinship enough to come to the aid of their brothers who are under attack and have been, for 20 years have been under the thumb of the Canaanite king. Anything else? Yeah, Barry, and then
Quick question.
you can go first. Go ahead.
Quick question. I missed what you said, what it meant when it said when locks go untrimmed.
Yes, it's an odd expression and one that really is unclear. But it seems to be, we would call it an unsettled or chaotic time.
Okay, thank you.
A time when bandits are preying on people on the roads, caravans can't afford to go where they ordinarily go. It's that kind of a period. This is typical of the period of Judges, where we don't have central leadership or power. And we're going to see in the next story, actually, an example of that, where we'll look at the judge whose name was Yiftach, who will join himself with a band of brigands. Brigands? I don't know how to pronounce that. Bad people in a similar chaotic time. Anything else? Yeah, Barry.
Yes, on the past few decades, there's been an emphasis on the importance of women in the Bible.
Yes.
But I can imagine that there would be some mixed feelings about the role of Yael in this situation, because it's terribly brutal and what deceptive and then brutal.
Yeah, I guess so. But if you look at what Sisera's mother is like, there is this sense. I think it is a woman acting in a very masculine way. Run your enemy through with a sword, cut off their head. And I think, if it's hard to, one wonders if the author of this was a woman. It's really a remarkable, we see it a little bit. We see, Miriam is called a prophetess also. But this is really remarkable, I think. Extraordinarily feminist text, really extraordinarily feminist. Other comments? Okay, Well, so I look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sorry. The next 2 weeks we're off. I'll see you in 3 weeks. And we'll pick up with two more judges, two more leaders. One is Yiftach, who you may well not have heard of, and then Samson, who I'm sure you've heard of. Okay, see you then. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving,
You too.
and see you in 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.